All right, so we're using an orbital to sand the faces of these. Rule of thumb, when we have a large surface to sand, we'll use the orbital. When we have edges to sand, we're gonna use a block and some sandpaper. Primary reason is that the base of this is spongy to some degree, and we don't want to round over the edges too much. We want to just sand them flat and keep our corners to a large degree there. So the orbital is for large faces, tops of the steps. You can do the face of the rails with them, but that would be as small as we want to be for the face of the rails to sand with the orbital. Okay? The other thing about the orbital is that we go very slowly when we're doing this. Our planer is producing or giving us some lines on here. So we're going to start always this year with 100 grit sandpaper, which has to do with the size of the back says 100. It's an 8 loop sanding pad here. It has to do with the size of the stones is what 100 grit means. So we'll start with a 100. I'll go ahead and I'll remove all my pencil lines here. After that, I'll move on to a 150. And as a final sanding item, we're going to take 220 grit and we're going to use a block and we're going to go with the grain on this. You don't need to do a whole lot with the 220 after you've done the 150. So just once over with the 220. You don't have to remake your hash marks on here and remove them again. We're doing this once, the hash marks, and that's it. So the reason I'm giving you a demonstration on sanding is because so many people use this thing incorrectly. A sander is supposed to be not pressed down firmly and not moved around real fast. I see students that are always doing this kind of thing. Okay? The idea here is that an orbital does all kinds of movement, circular, left, right, up, down, so it doesn't produce any scratches that would be against the grain necessarily. I mean, of course, to some degree it will, but in pushing it down, what we do is we give the wood these little curly cue marks that don't reveal themselves until we put a stain or a finish on this. So when we're sanding with the 100 grit, I'm not putting downward pressure, I'm just moving my abrasive across the material. Our bags do a pretty good job of picking up the sawdust. These bags just have a lock, they pull out, and when we're done, we'll dump this out. Or if you get a sander and it feels like it has something in the bag, just go ahead and dump it out before you start using it. Put it on, and rotate it until it's locked. This is the pace that I want you to sand at. Remember, the reason we're using an electric sander is because it's doing the work for us. It saves us all the mechanical motions of ourselves doing it. It does that all as an electric sander. So we're not trying to move all over it and don't. I also see people that will see a spot they don't like and they'll tilt the sander like this to try to get that spot by itself. You're going to create a divot right where that spot is, so you're not going to have a flat plane anymore on your material, which is not something that we want. Okay, so if there's an area that you have to get, then you keep seeing the whole thing. Okay, until you've gotten that area. Okay, so this is not nearly finished the 100 yet. I want to keep getting that, and I want to feel for any of the grooves that were created in the planer and make sure I remove them with the 100. Then I move to the 150. I repeat the process. Lastly, I do it with the grain with 220. Okay? With our cleats, we'll sand with a block and sandpaper for everything. It's not going to be necessary to do any sanding on the back of these cleats if they'll sit flat against them. Unless you feel that there really is a proud or raised surface on here that's going to prevent your cleat from sitting flat against your leg. In that case, maybe you would want to sand it with a 100 on the back side here. There's no reason to go past 100. Okay? And we're trying to keep a flat plane the entire time. So that is going to be how we're going to put up the cleats here. Once we get them on here, once we have our counter bores done, we're going to go through those counter bores at their center with a 1/8 inch bit. So on all these holes here, you can see that the center is pretty well marked because of the 4-cylinder bit that was used in there. We're going to take this thing over to the drill press and we're going to go through each center there with a 1/8 bit. That's going to allow for our screw to go through. Once we have those all pre-drilled and we peeled off any chip out off the back of this, we're going to locate this at the spot that we want it. And we're going to drill down enough for our screw to go in. Now let me show you how we're going to set that up also. Over here, we have 3/4 inch screws. I'm getting screws out, I'm getting my bits out, and I'm getting 2 different drills here. One is a drill that would be used for inserting drill bits, twist bits like these, in which case right now I'd be using the 1/8 bit. And the other one's called an impact driver. So the screws that we're using are unique because the heads of those allow for us to use a Phillips head bit, and they also allow for us to use a square head bit. Here's a square head bit, and it fits into that screw, like that. Square head bits are much less inclined to strip when we try to put those in. So this bit, because of how the back is there, goes into our impact driver. If you put it in there just like so, and then go to screw something in, it's going to drop right out. It has to be set in, and then with a little pressure on the end of it, we're going to lift that forward and see how the bit drops in there, and now it's locked in its position. Okay? You cannot put a bit into this and have it hold. Okay? They do sell bits out there that on the back of the bit would have that end on it, but we don't use those in this classroom. Okay? So you could buy bits that would be able to be put in an impact driver, but we're not going to be using those. Okay? Next thing to show you is how you're going to ensure that you don't drill through the other side of the board. So with this, I'm taking an 1/8 inch bit that I've pre-drilled in through here, and I want to make sure that it doesn't go through the board behind it. So I'm going to hold my bit to the thickness of my material there, and I'm going to take a piece of green tape. I'm going to tape that at the thickness of my material. So now when I go through into this, it's going to go through, my tape's going to stop at that, and that'll be enough of a pre-drill for our screw to be able to sit into this. You don't want to go through and pre-drill all 6 holes and then try to put a screw in, because there is a likelihood that this is going to shift in between holes that you're drilling, and so all 6 holes won't align. So my advice for you is to drill one, put a 3/4 inch screw into that, and then move to the other ones, so then it's somewhat stationary, so it's not going to move on you while you drill your other holes. Okay? All 6 screws go in there, so you need 12 screws total at 3/4 inch length to adhere our cleats to. And then we'll be ready to start doing our rails.